Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded if Iran tries to assassinate him. On the same day, NBC News confirmed that the U.S. agreed to Iran's request to continue diplomatic talks. The fighting has apparently paused. Ali Khamenei has been buried in Mashhad, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman called Trump to discuss the situation. Cuba's national power grid collapsed for the second time in under a week, during what is described as the island's worst economic crisis in decades. And Spain beat Belgium 2-1 on Friday, with a goalkeeper's error and a substitute who has now scored late winning goals in 2 consecutive knockout matches. Today, Norway faces England, and Argentina faces Switzerland in the World Cup quarterfinals. Let's take all 3, because the combination of events over the past 24 hours represents the most compressed version yet of the contradictions that have defined this entire conflict. The Anadolu Agency's July 11th morning briefing led with this: Trump threatening to launch 1,000 missiles at Iran should it try to assassinate him, writing on Truth Social that those missiles were locked and loaded, with more to follow. That Truth Social post exists in direct, documented tension with what NBC News simultaneously reported, that the United States has agreed to Iran's request to continue diplomatic talks, as Trump declared at the NATO summit, is over. But the talks that were supposed to run alongside the ceasefire are continuing, because Iran asked for them to continue, and the U.S. said yes. NPR's July 10th reporting provided the most measured framing of where things actually stand. And Iran appears to have paused after 2 days of clashing, amid a shaky ceasefire. Note the language precisely: not resumed, not ended. It appears to have paused. After 2 days in which the U.S. struck more than 80 targets on Night 1 and an additional round of targets on Night 2, including a railway bridge that carries Iranian trade with China and Russia, and after Iran fired 10 ballistic missiles at a U.S. base in Jordan and attacked U.S. military installations in 4 countries. The shooting has, as of Friday, apparently stopped again. The word appears, in NPR's framing, is doing significant load-bearing work. The assassination framing that has entered Trump's public language is worth examining carefully because it shifts the register of the conflict in a specific way. When the U.S. president posts that 1,000 missiles are ready to fire if Iran attempts to kill him personally, he is framing what has been a state-level military conflict as a personal confrontation between himself and an adversary. That framing has domestic political utility. It allows Trump to present the conflict as defending himself and, by extension, the country. But it also creates a specific escalatory risk that a more impersonal state-level framing doesn't. Threats to the person of a world leader from another world leader tend to be treated by the threatened government as a direct security challenge requiring response, regardless of the military balance. Whether that framing is strategic or impulsive is not something the Truth Social post answers. The Saudi dimension that landed Friday deserves attention, because it tells you something about how this conflict's geography is being managed at the highest level. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman called Trump to discuss U.S.-Iran talks and regional developments. According to Anadolu Agency's confirmed reporting, Saudi Arabia has not been a formal party to either the war or the peace negotiations, but it is the most important Arab state in the Gulf, controls significant oil production, has its own complex historical rivalry with Iran, and maintains extremely close ties with the Trump administration. A direct phone call between MBS and Trump about Iran is not a procedural event. It signals that Saudi Arabia is positioning itself as an active influence over where this situation goes next, whether toward a resumed deal, toward sustained conflict, or something else entirely, or toward something more lasting. Ali Khamenei was buried at the Imam Reza Shrine in Mashhad on July 9th, as Anadolu Agency confirmed, closing out a week-long funeral attended by millions across Iran. The burial of the supreme leader who was killed in the February 28 strikes that started this war marks a formal end to the mourning period. It also marks a moment at which the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who still has not appeared in public, must begin exercising visible authority over a country that has spent 2 months in mourning, war, and diplomatic limbo. The burial closes a chapter. What the next chapter requires from him is not yet clear, but the mourning period's conclusion removes one structural reason for the diplomatic pause and raises the question of whether Iran's new leadership will make itself publicly visible in the context of whatever comes next in the negotiations. Venezuela's earthquake death toll has risen again to 418, with more than 16,700 injured and thousands still displaced, per Anadolu's July 11th briefing from Venezuela's National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez. 3 weeks ago, that toll was under 1,000. It is now over 4,000. I say that plainly because the number deserves to be said plainly. Even when there is a war and a World Cup absorbing the same news cycle. Now Cuba, because this story is receiving almost no coverage relative to what is happening, and what is happening is the physical collapse of an entire country's infrastructure in real time. Cuba's national power grid suffered a total collapse on Friday. Not a partial outage, not a rolling blackout, a total collapse. According to Anadolu Agency's July 11th briefing, this is the second nationwide blackout in less than a week. The first, which received brief international coverage, was described at the time as the consequence of accumulated failures in Cuba's aging generation infrastructure. The second total collapse happening within days of the first tells you that the first was not an anomaly, and that whatever emergency measures were implemented in the interim were insufficient to prevent a repeat. The context Anadolu provides is essential. This is happening during Cuba's worst economic crisis in decades. Cuba's economic deterioration over the past several years has been severe and multi-causal. The country lost roughly $2 billion annually in Venezuelan oil subsidies when Venezuela's own collapse curtailed that relationship. COVID-19 devastated tourism, which was the primary source of hard currency the government used to import fuel and spare parts for its Soviet-era power infrastructure. U.S. sanctions, which were tightened during Trump's first term and never fully reversed under Biden, further constrained Cuba's access to fuel, equipment, and financial transactions. The result is a power system that runs on aging Soviet-era equipment with inadequate fuel supplies, maintained by engineers who can see what's coming but don't have the parts to prevent it. When an entire country's power grid collapses, the human consequences are immediate and severe. Hospitals lose power, water systems stop working because municipal water in Cuba depends on electric pumps. Heat, which is already dangerous in the Caribbean summer, becomes life-threatening without fans or air conditioning for the elderly and sick. The second total collapse in a week tells you this is not a crisis that will be resolved by technical fixes to the existing system. It is a structural failure of a power infrastructure that has been allowed to deteriorate past the point where incremental repairs are sufficient. Cuba is 90 miles from Florida. It is a country of approximately 11 million people. Its government is authoritarian, and its diplomatic relationship with the United States is adversarial. None of those facts change what a total collapse of the national power grid means for the people who live there. The coverage of this story in U.S. media has been sparse, and the sparse coverage reflects both the diplomatic awkwardness of emphasizing Cuban suffering in an American news cycle and the genuine competition for attention from the Iran war and the World Cup. The coverage being sparse doesn't change what's happening. And now Friday's football, because what happened at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood had enough genuine drama to deserve real time. Spain beat Belgium 2-1, with Mikel Merino scoring the winning goal in the 88th minute, 2 minutes after entering the match as a substitute, following a costly error by Belgium's emergency replacement goalkeeper. That sequence is worth walking through in detail, because the last 15 minutes of this match were the kind of football that reminds you why the sport has the hold on global attention that it does. Spain opened the scoring through Fabian Ruiz. That goal, on its own, was expected. Spain had been statistically dominant throughout the tournament, and their XG of 2.08 against Belgium's 0.38 confirmed they were far the better side on the day. What was not expected was what happened in the 41st minute. Who also scored twice against the United States in the round of 16, found the net for Belgium, and in doing so ended what had been an extraordinary run. Spain had not conceded a single goal in the entirety of World Cup 2026 before that moment. Their clean sheet record through 6 matches was the most discussed defensive statistic of the tournament. De Ketelaere ended it. Belgium had their equalizer. And then in the 71st minute, goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois, one of the finest goalkeepers of his generation and Spain's most dangerous opponent in this match, went down trying to make a save on Mikel Oyarzabal. He sat on the turf during the hydration break, and per Yahoo Sports' confirmed reporting, was visibly upset as he walked to the Belgium bench. He left in tears. It was, per multiple outlets, potentially the final international appearance of his career. His replacement, Seny Lamens, had been in the match for just over 15 minutes when a shot from Pau Cubarsí arrived at him in the penalty area, a shot that, in ESPN's confirmed assessment, was routine. Lamens spilled it. The ball sat in the 6-yard box. Mikel Merino, who had entered the match 2 minutes earlier as a substitute for Dani Olmo, reacted fastest and slammed it home. Spain 2-1. Belgium out. I want to name 2 things specifically about this result. Mikel Merino has now scored the decisive winning goal as a substitute in 2 consecutive knockout matches, against Portugal in the 91st minute of the round of 16, and now against Belgium in the 88th minute of the quarterfinal. That is a record of impact that no amount of tactical analysis adequately captures. A substitute who comes on and produces the moment that eliminates 2 major European nations in consecutive matches is, regardless of the broader game, a player making a historically significant tournament contribution. Second, Belgium's elimination closes something. This Belgian squad, built around De Bruyne, Lukaku, Courtois, and a generation of extraordinary talent, has been called the Golden Generation for the better part of a decade and a half. They never won a major international trophy. The 2018 World Cup, where they reached the semifinals and lost to France, was their closest moment. This World Cup, with De Bruyne and Lukaku still in the squad, with Courtois leaving in tears from a quarterfinal defeat, is the definitive end of that era. A generation of players who were widely expected to produce a historic result for Belgium finished their international careers with a runner-up at the 2018 World Cup as their best outcome. That is not a failure on any normal measure. It is simply less than what was promised, which may be the most human sporting story of all. Today, 2 more quarterfinals decide the other semifinal bracket. Norway faces England in Miami. Argentina faces Switzerland in their own stadium. Erling Haaland and Harry Kane are level in the Golden Boot race at 7 goals heading into Norway-England, with Mbappe currently leading at 8. Lionel Messi will play for Argentina against a Swiss side that has already beaten Colombia in the knockout round. The 4 remaining quarterfinal results are not yet known at the time of writing, but by tonight, the full semifinal bracket will be set. 3 stories today. Trump posted that 1,000 missiles are ready if Iran tries to assassinate him, while simultaneously agreeing to Iran's request to continue diplomatic talks, and the fighting that produced strikes on 4 countries in 2 days appears, for now, to have paused. Cuba's national power grid collapsed for the 2nd time in a week, while the country faces its worst economic crisis in modern history. 90 miles from the United States, with almost no coverage, and Spain eliminated Belgium with a goalkeeper's error and a substitute's 2nd consecutive late-winning goal, ending an era for a generation of Belgian players whose talent never quite aligned with the moment to deliver what it promised. The Iran story's paradox. 1,000 missiles locked and loaded, talks continuing, fighting paused, is the paradox that has defined this war since the first ceasefire announcement in late May. Both things keep being true at the same time. The question this week answered in the clearest terms yet is that the U.S. is willing to escalate to strikes on supply chain infrastructure connecting Iran to China and Russia, while simultaneously maintaining that some form of diplomatic track is still open. What Iran does with that combination, with Khamenei now buried, with the mourning period formally closed, with a new supreme leader who hasn't been seen in public, is the most consequential open question in global affairs right now. Cuba is a country that is collapsing. The coverage doesn't match the event, and the World Cup's quarterfinals end tonight. The rest of it is 4 matches and then a championship.